Welcome to the commentary booth where we watch and you guessed it, commentate on the week that was in movies and TV. I'm your host and play-by-play commentator Jamie Apps, and each week I'm joined by a rotating cast of colour commentators to help you find your next viewing treat. This week I'm joined by the host of The Pop Culturist to accompany me into the territory wrestling war of heels. Welcome to the show, Ryan Betson.
Thanks for having me back, man.
No, pleasure. As soon as I saw that this show was sort of the season was wrapping up. I didn't realize the show was wrapping up. I knew I had to get you in.
I obviously being the big wrestling fan that I am, and the show was exceptional. I remember watching it like when it first started, like during the lockdown days. I watched it with a mate of mine through like Discord, and I instantly fell in love with it because it had such this like legitimate respect for the industry. And as someone like myself who works in the space, you know, so it's fun to be here in the commentary booth because I am a wrestling commentator now, which is exciting. And sort of working in the business from a production standpoint for the longest time and sort of seeing them handle it with like legitness, not a word, but, you know, giving it like absolute respect and demonstrating like the world of kayfabe and delivering it in such a way, even naming the episodes that just show that these people care in how they make this show. It was lovely. So good. Such a good show.
Yeah, I think that was probably like a bit of Stephen Amell's influence, having been him being a long-time wrestling fan and being in WWE and AEW matches. It kind of made sense that there was a bit of that reverence for the entertainment portion of wrestling.
Yeah, very much so. Like, yeah, and obviously it made it even easier that he's in fact wrestled. So, you know, when it comes to him doing, you know, stunts and spots and stuff, it was very, very cool. But that's season 1 stuff.
Yeah. So before we dive into season 2, just going to continue, even though it seems to have wrapped up, Harrier Magazine stands in solidarity and support for the WGA and SAG-AFTRA in their fight for better working conditions. Our publication has always been focused on the creative brilliance of these individuals rather than on the business of film and TV, and as such we will continue to highlight their creative talents during this time so that their contributions to our entertainment are not overlooked. Thankfully, the Writers Guild have got a good deal out of this so far. Hopefully the
tentative deal.
Yes.
Yeah, it's looking positive.
Yeah.
But like, you know, silver linings.
I think they've just got to vote on it now.
Yeah, pretty much.
So hopefully the
good
Actors
movement.
Guild is not too far behind.
Well, and the video game side of things also got they voted to strike this week, so it's getting there everywhere, which is awesome.
Yeah, the AI stuff is very concerning. I can see why.
It's one of those things like these
protection.
fucks have so much money. Like these companies have so much money, and they're like, "Oh, we can't afford it." Bullshit, you can't.
Exactly.
Pay them.
Yeah, exactly.
Pay them what they're worth, because you wouldn't have any money to mess about with without these people. All right, Pay them.
Yeah,
simple.
And like the one I always keep coming back to recently is Suits on Netflix. Has been the highest rated show for the last like 3 months on Netflix. No royalties from that.
Nope. Or, you know, Aaron Paul said it with Breaking Bad as well, which, you know, is insane because Breaking Bad is, if not the best show ever made, in my opinion. And that's painful. It's rough.
Okay, so this week we're returning to the Duffy Dome to immerse ourselves in the territory wrestling as the Duffy Wrestling League battles against Florida Wrestling Dystopia during season 2 of the pro wrestling drama series Heels. Before we break down season 2 and all of the recent news, do you want to just sort of go through your history with the show and where you're sitting at it with now that it's kind of wrapped up, sadly?
Yeah, so I shared this story with you in Twitter DMs. So as I mentioned, this show came out during lockdown, right? So came like one of our various lockdowns here in Victoria. So it wasn't as gnarly for you. I spent a long time watching TV with my friends.
It was still pretty hectic up here.
Yeah, but like we had the harsh.
We just kind of got it 6 months later.
Yeah, you can't be near anyone kind of scenario. You can't think about anyone. But yeah, so I watched Heels during lockdown with my mate Craig. And I loved the show. I adored the show. And I loved the intro, the song, right? I forget what it's named, but it's incredible. And what I loved about it is it created this larger than life feel, right? It felt really ethereal. And like, even when how it's shot and they're all kind of like, sort of transparent, like, looking in the clouds, like this holier than thou sort of feeling. And I loved it. And I adored that theme tune so much so that I had it on my phone as my alarm. So every morning I'd get, and I was like, ah. However, sadly, in 2021, my marriage began to crumble, and it did end in the back end of that year. And during that time, this is a real weird tangent, but in that time, that song was still my alarm, right? So every day for work, that's what I would hear. So when I was, at my mate's house in their spare room, missing my son and sort of just having a horrible time every day, that was what I would hear. So for the longest time, whenever I hear that song, was actually very difficult for me to listen to, because it would flash me back to that time, and I would get this nothing but sinking feeling in my chest, which was really hard for a show that I absolutely adored and I thought was brilliant. And every time I hear it, I was just like, oh, because I want to rewatch it, and then I can't because it hurts. So it's been a couple years. I have myself a new partner now, and she's lovely. And for whatever reason, she's open to the dumb shit that is wrestling. And, she comes to shows with me and has a great time. And I was like, hey, there's this show. The new season's coming. Would you want to watch it? Like, now that you know a bit more about the business, would you like to watch the show? She's like, yeah, sure. Why not? And then I told her that Stephen Amell got his kid off, and she was like, well, when can we start watching it?
Yeah, that's a good selling point.
Yeah, even for me, I'm like, he gets his fucking kid off. It's awesome. Like, so her and I rewatched season 1. And once again, it was really hard, like having to experience that, with my new partner, and trying to hide that within me. But as we went through season 1, then as you went week by week with season 2, like, I noticed that it was starting to change. So as we kicked in for the season finale of series 2, of season 2, I should say, it was awesome, because in that moment, I didn't have that sinking feeling anymore. It was replaced with a joyful feeling of getting it to share with my partner, Phoebe, because, she had never, she jumped into it and she cared and she committed, and she's like, this show fucking rules. So like during the week, the next day after we'd watch it, she'd message me being like,
all the thoughts
like,
and water cooler talk after.
Yeah. Which is awesome. And I love like pulling apart like TV shows and stuff, which is why when you said, hey, you want to come talk Kills? I'm like, fuck yes, I want to come talk Kills. So like for me, this season alone is huge. Like outside of the show itself, like I'm a big sentimental kind of person, right? Like it's just who I am. And I whether it be my neurodiversity or whatever, like in my brain, I connect things heavily to feelings. So like, it's so good to be able to switch that and turn it. It is disappointing that there may not happen again, with the presumed cancellation of the show. But yeah, that's like my experience with the show. It's not about the show. That's just me, like, that. So yeah,
No,
that's the first time I've said that like outside of myself or a Twitter DM. So thank you.
yeah, that's like crazy to see how much it has changed just for you inside, like to go from something you loved to then kind of something you dreaded, even hearing the theme song for, to then slowly building that love back up again.
Yeah, I don't think like dread's not quite the word. It's like a sorrow, right? Like it's a pain, and I think not to like jerk my own dick or nothing, but like it's like a testament to like my growth as a person as well, to be able to move on, try to move on from the past and become better, and all those little things, which is a massive story of redemption, which we see in this show. And it's probably one of the other reasons why I love it. I love redemption stories because, admittedly, for the longest time I've been seeking my own redemption. So to see any media that shares that story is an instant win for me.
And you mentioned having it as your alarm tone.
Mm.
That's kind of always the danger of putting something you love as your wake up alarm.
It
you
is.
can start to despise that song. quite
Yeah.
quickly.
Thankfully, my ringtone is still Adam Cole's AEW theme, and I'm not out of that yet, so that's
That's a
good.
great theme. That's a great ringtone.
How about yourself?
So yeah, I was fortunate enough to get season 1 early. So
Oh, you nerd.
I got to binge watch the first season, which was very cool rather than watching it week by week. So going
Yeah, I did the same with The Last of Us, and it actually changed the viewing experience.
Oh,
Like, so it's kind
yeah.
of, I'm very curious on what like you thought having to cram it all together.
So yeah, basically that first season I enjoyed, but I didn't find myself being sort of super eager to watch each episode, like subsequent episode. Like I'd watch in spurts, and I'd watch 2 or 3 and then stop, and then come back and watch 2 and then stop. Whereas this one, season 2, I think by watching it week to week, I was eagerly anticipating, oh, the new episode drops at like 4 o'clock on Thursday.
4 o'clock on a
I was
Friday.
like,
Yeah.
cool. I'm going to be there ready to watch it straight away. So it definitely changed the perspective on that. And I thought season 2 was a better season, like more compelling in terms of the stories. And it felt more real. It's still real to me, damn it, in terms of it like being not so regional and local, like hyper focused on, it's just like this local town's promotion, and it seems weird that like everyone comes to this show. Whereas in season 2, it was like, oh no, this is like your ROH or your Impact, where it's not quite this grand national touring promotion, but it's on that sort of second tier where a lot of people around the world know about this promotion, and the ones that can get there get to check it out and watch the show, which I think, yeah, like I said, made it feel more real and more believable that
Interesting.
the DWL is a legitimate promotion.
I have some counter thoughts to that, actually.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But I'll let you finish yours and we'll come back.
No, that's pretty much where I was at.
Beautiful. So obviously you prefer season 2 to season 1? Excellent. So some of the things that the wording that you use there, I don't disagree with it, but I don't agree with it, but I don't disagree with it either. It's a weird kind of line. So I do believe the season 2 really kind of ramped up what I love about shows like this, which is character. And it's what I love about wrestling, right? It's character. So we're seeing a lot more of that, which is lovely. But what I felt watching season 1 felt real and dirty and gritty, right? And real, like, to me, that felt like super real. This season, it felt like they really turned up the wrestling ham of it all and kind of got little sprinkles of like your 80s sort of wrestling, as in it was shot better. It was way more colorful. Like they've intentionally made these decisions to like shoot it differently. And like there are moments where people have these incredible monologues, which didn't really exist in the first season, as they now sort of get these soap opera sort of moments, which is wrestling's just soap opera, by the way. And that's what's so good about it. So to be able to like really turn into that soap opera-ness, even with how the season ended, is very soap opera, which I love. Like it's one of those things where like, I see it as an improvement, where you've got, it's your different eras, right? You had almost like not quite your attitude era, but like it was a little bit like that. And then you've pivoted into this bigger, larger sort of era of the show. As someone that works within deathmatch wrestling, and I love deathmatch wrestling, I did really disagree with how they handled FWD in season 1. They kind of made out they're all fucking disgusting deviants and shit. Like, and look, we kind of are, but like not to the extent that they said, right? We just like a different way of wrestling. So I really liked that they kind of turned that part down a little bit, and in season 2 demonstrated it's just an alternative. It's a more extreme alternative rather than this, mutilation, whatever, right? And they ramped up the battling, felt very, WWE, WCW sort of stuff, which was really cool. There's a lot more references to the outside wrestling scene in the likes of WWE, etc. Like there were hints at it in the past, which is interesting. In season 1, we get like Mick Foley come in as not Mick Foley, but WWE exists. So that's kind of a little thing, but wrestling's full of continuity errors. We see a lot of characters pivot too. Like we see a lot of face turns. Like Wild Bill becomes the most inspiring person in all of television, apparently.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where you spend season 1 going, how did this guy get to presumably the WWE is what they're hinting at, right? Or WCW or some sort of larger promotion, because he's reckless and he's just abhorrent. And in here you see him go, oh no, you get it. Like you're one of those dudes that you have that mask. You're the weird opposite of Taker in that like you were in kayfabe all the time.
Yep.
So now you get to sort of pull out of that, which is exciting. And even to see some of the growth within like, Jack and Ace. And then we see the bubbling undercurrent with the DWL and Willie and like, well, how is this all working? Because the first thing I thought in season 1 is I'm like, as someone that works in wrestling, how do they pay for this venue? This venue is insane.
It's a massive venue.
It's fucked. There is no way that anyone that has the 200, not even 200 people that are in that arena fund it. It's insane. However, to your point though, in super regional country towns, like these events happen, not wrestling, but like sports. Like so for the promotion that I work for, we were doing a show in Shepparton, right? Which is middle of fuck knows where in Victoria. So we went all to the surrounding towns to try and get people to come to the show. We went on a Saturday morning and the towns were dead because everyone was at the local footy ground. So the idea of everyone congregating to a space makes sense. And it felt like one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone and like you can go to the shop and they know who you are, what you do. But I also love the idea that the entire town's in on it and that they know that they're all like, no, this is kayfabe. So we treat like if we don't see them together, they're a prick and they're not really I love that.
Even when they're going to like get petrol and stuff, they're treating the wrestlers as if they would at the arena.
Yeah. It's so good. And they're like, hey, we can't see Ace and Jack in the same car because they're like feuding right now, And then, we see a bunch of other characters sort of get fleshed out. Like obviously Big Jim returns, which is great. And Bobby Pin, who I adore. And even Crystal, obviously ending season 1 in a big moment of winning the title. They find a way to work that in. She didn't take her shirt off once, so fucking character growth to her, which is incredible. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a dude. I love like, random nudity in TV shows. But like, it felt odd. And like now that they've like grown her as a character, because that was the first thing. Because when I watched season 1 with my partner, I said to her, I said, watch Crystal. Like, just watch her growth. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but just watch it. And like, I saw her literally go, ugh! Like when she won the title at the fair. So I was like, perfect. That's exactly what that show should be doing.
Yeah, you mentioned the eras. I definitely picked up on that. Like, I felt season 1 was your sort of territory wrestling days.
Yeah.
Like it was smaller promotions. They mentioned going to New York. I don't think they ever said WWE, or they'd say like going up north.
I think they hinted at Connecticut, up north to Connecticut.
Yeah, I don't think they ever like specifically called out WWE. Whereas in this second season, they say WWE. I'm pretty sure they say ROH and TNA.
They drop Rey Mysterio. Like they're like name dropping everywhere.
They definitely got some friendly licensing agreements to get those mentions in, and
even down to like season 1, they had what looked like a replica of Naomi's WWE Championship, and they mocked it, which was an interesting decision.
Yeah, so like it kind of felt like they moved from that territory days where everyone was like very separate. We don't mention each other. We refer to them, but we don't like blatantly call them out. Whereas then they shifted to this new era where we're in the sort of the Monday Night Wars, like FWD versus DWL. It's well known there's these two promotions we're fighting against each other, much like WWE, WCW. They mention all the other companies, and they even surprisingly had some licensed footage from TNA in there, which was shocking to see. And my one
because they did that in the back end of season 1 as well when they were showing FWD, yeah.
Yep. And then strangely, there was no reference to AEW or even like, I don't think they referenced like Japanese wrestling or anything. Like, I would have
No.
loved to see a season 3 and we can start to be like, oh yeah, wrestling is global. It's not
Well,
just the US.
like we'll discuss story beats in a moment, but the story that they were leading to is like this idea that they get acquired essentially. So that would create that globalization. They're going to get a buttload of funding, presumably like they can do all this, that, the other, and then that world becomes a thing. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw like some like their version of NJPW or something like that. But even then, yeah, it's very interesting how they sort of acknowledge the bigger, but not really, because they talked about how wrestling being like $1 billion industry, which it literally is. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I loved that there was even one point where they recreate the invasion angle or right down to the tank and everything. I was like, that's really cool. There's lots of like Easter eggs and love for wrestling. Like if you're a wrestling fan, every episode you're picking something and be like, oh, that's a reference to this thing.
That's what I'm saying. That handles that like that respect for the business. Not as many cameos as I saw in this season. Like obviously last season we saw Mick Foley. Obviously CM Punk came in, but he came in as a recurring character. So it sucks to be him to get essentially fired from a second job this month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
not a great rant.
No. Luke Gallows I saw in season 1. I didn't really see anyone else sort of pop up, even in like background characters.
There was a few.
Unless I missed some.
There was a fair few.
Who else popped up?
So the independent wrestler Luke Hawks is like the bald guy that's like the FWD's like second in charge guy. Like he's the one that he walks around. He looks like a dominatrix.
Yep.
All the like BDSM gear on. Mick Foley was back. Damian Sandow.
Wait, Foley was back? Where?
I'm pretty sure he was in like a podcast episode. They had him in like a podcast.
Oh, okay.
Damian Sandow, Jordan Grace, and
yes, of course,
Nick Aldis. When they're at the FWD arena, they're all the part of the wrestlers standing around the ring.
Yes,
and Crystal goes up against Serena Deeb in a match as well.
She does, and of course, obviously AJ Lee
was the other big one. Was like, oh, cool to see.
Oh, I forgot about this. Is the one downside of my brain and watching weekly is I don't remember half this shit.
Yeah,
I forgot about Serena Deeb. That was a good spot. I did say, like, holy shit, that's rad.
And that's like one of my...
Because then I had to explain who Serena Deeb was to my partner because she didn't understand why I popped.
That's like one of the fun things with watching these sort of wrestling shows. Like, they're going to have wrestlers in the background of episodes and stuff. And I remember even season 1, they had, I'm pretty sure Sick Nick Mondo was one of the like random dudes you see in like a locker room walk in the background because he had like sick written across his forehead. And I was like, hey, it's a random indie wrestler to have in the background. Like, okay, cool.
That was good.
And I was shocked when I looked up some of the info on this show in terms of the creators. Created by Michael Waldron, who also was a writer for Community, Rick and Morty, the Loki TV series, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and Avengers Secret Wars. I was like, wow, this guy's written a lot of stuff I liked and a lot of stuff that hasn't been so great recently.
Well, see, that's the thing. So, like, when you mentioned, I was like, I know that name. And you said Community, I'm like, boom. And that explains how we got that connection to whether it be Rick and Morty or Disney, with the Russo brothers heading over from their time on Community over to like the Avengers. There's some stuff in the middle, but like, you can draw the line. So that explains that.
Yep. You got to love
But yes, there are some strong hit and misses. But it was one of the very similar to how like the Avengers movies, you can see the skills in Russo's from Community where they're able to really show and how they work with the dynamic cast. And we saw that here. Like one of the big things you notice from season 1 to season 2 is everyone becomes important.
Yep.
Like it's not just the Spades. Like everyone becomes important in season 2.
And I think that's a wrestling thing too. Like when a promotion first starts out, you have like the 4 or 5 guys that are the key to the promotion, and then they slowly build them up. Like AEW now, kind of anyone on that roster can be thrown in and you look at them as a legitimate contender. Whereas in that first year, it was if you're
Jericho,
not
Bucks,
Mox,
Cody,
Jericho, Bucks, Cody or
Pack, maybe.
Kenny. It's like
Yeah.
you're not like at the top of the card, whereas now it's like, oh, we can chuck an Orange Cassidy in there and it's believable to have him at the top of the card.
Yeah.
That was a nice, again, echoing the wrestling world. What did you think of Jack Spade and Ace Spade in season 2?
Once again, face turns, especially Ace, huge face turn.
Massive. Yeah.
And I think that was really good. I think they went a little hard on it, but I think it worked. And because initially you're like, well, why are you making such this like, prophetic sort of thing? And then as you realize throughout the season, it's like, this is him essentially realizing what was hurting him, which was the loss of his father and how he had channeled that incorrectly. And then now he's at a position where he's like, my dad controlled my life in that he made me do all these sports, made me this competitor, but told me I couldn't do this one thing that I'm actually really good at and I really enjoy. But even in his death, he is still controlling me because how I feel, how I act, how I respond is all because of his reactions. So I really liked that. And sort of even his mum had that huge turn because I thought she was a right bitch for like all of the first season, even in the beginning of season 2. And then very quickly I went, oh no, you're just hurting differently. Okay.
Yeah, she just can't be around wrestling anymore because of it.
Yeah, and she had those little moments where she sort of like chipped away and you got to see a bit of it. And even in the final episode of season 1 where she like is happy to watch the show and then kind of, when they implode on each other as they do, which is really cool. I did like, Jack's growth as well. Even sort of painfully watching his marriage fall apart also. In kind of a not entirely a mirrored way, but a big part of my marriage was that I undiagnosed ADHD at the time. I channeled my in shit where I shouldn't have. I focused more externally than I should have internally. Is within the house that I lived in. Like in the same as Jack, like I cared about my family and I cared about my son and I gave them everything. They never went without. But like part of me was always somewhere else, whether it be making content, working wrestling, doing this, doing that, like all these other things. So it was very interesting to sort of see that here. And thankfully they got a much nicer outcome than mine. But if anything, admittedly, my outcome's pretty fucking good now. In that, like, we're all good. My son, I see my son whenever I want. And, it's silver linings everywhere, as I'm getting at. But like, to see that, and even to see how Stacey sort of flipped as well. And I was trying to think about it because I was at the gym before I came here, trying to like remember the show. And I don't remember how she turned as well, because she was like viciously against. And then she kind of came back. I think she sort of realized how important it is to them and how it like, because there's a lot of conversations in this about like why they do it. And it's powerful in that, like people, why would you do this every week in like the fucking shitty rundown hall? And it's one of those things because, and it's the same as myself. When I work these shows, I get to do something that's greater than me. I get to be in a room. I get to put a headset on. I get to play a character that is Betson, which is me amplified. And I'm there just to make people look good. And I get to live this world that is different. And everything that exists outside goes away for a moment. So I think explaining that in the show is really good to understand, to sort of demonstrate to people like why they do this. And I think having a character reflect that and go, oh, I get it. And then the idea is like, it shouldn't be the divider. It should be what brings us together, because that's what it is. Wrestling is, it's a place where misfits get to come together and not be, misfits and outcasts, and they have to come to a space where they are not outcasts anymore. They are part of an incredible community that cares and supports each other. And even though there's like fucking inter-promotional rivalries and stuff, at its core, it's family, but not in like the wanky way, but in like those that care for each other. Because we all know what it's like to not be wanted.
Yep.
So it's kind of cool to experience that in the show as well. But like, what about you? How do you think the Spades sort of grew?
I definitely liked
The boy was barely in it, by the way. I just realized. Where was their kid?
Yeah, he was kind of just off.
They went, we can't explain. Like, there's squirrels in the roof. He lives in the roof now. Go,
He's
kid.
just at school all the time, all day, every day. But yeah, Ace had, like, for me, perhaps some of the most growth in this season.
Yeah.
Him and Crystal, I think, grew incredibly.
Yeah.
Jack, yeah, had a big, like, arc throughout it where he was the bad guy, then, like, slowly trying to come back to being a good guy. And yeah, his whole marriage breakdown was very rough to watch. And I think, yeah, he went through that whole deal of, it's that age-old question of, like, why would you do wrestling? Like, you get paid very little. It hurts a lot. But for some reason, people can't stop. Like, they have to just keep going once they find that love. And I think that's passions. Like, people generally can't explain why they do it. Like, I've found interviewing people, when my first question is always, who are you outside of this passion? They're all like, I don't know. That is me.
Mm. Yeah. And like with that in mind, I think one of the greatest things this show did, and sorry, I think this kind of explains a bit more about the Spades, is that the show and the way it's written, like they blur that line between like kayfabe and the outside world and what's work and what's shoot seamlessly. Like beautifully. Like obviously it's all fucking work, but like, you know, like within the show's lore and continuity, like they blur so often and you're like, wait, why are you because even like Jack, like, that was a big thing. It's like you aren't really a heel.
Yeah.
The real Jack, right? I'm like, well, where is that line? What's the separation of the two?
Yeah, and he's in like tractor sales and lawnmower sales, so he's a great salesman. I'll give him that much. And
yeah,
I think Ace is the one where that division becomes a lot more clear towards the end of the season when he starts, like
it blurs something fierce when he starts creating the Condemned, which is still a funny name. But yeah, as you sort of see the separation, yeah, you are correct.
Especially when he gets that like nursing home job, that's when he really separates. Like, oh, I don't have to be the same guy all the time everywhere. Like I can just be Ace at home versus Ace at the Duffy Dome.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a lesson a lot of wrestlers sort of go through as well early on in their careers. Like, oh, wait, I don't have to be the same guy all the time.
Well, especially in the indies, it's really tough because you can't really do characters in the indies per se. Like, you can't be the Undertaker in the indies because everyone's kind of like, you know, fans are try to be marks all the time, right? Or smarks. So they're all like, but like, so most people just kind of play themselves or a variant of themselves or parts of their personality amplified. So no one really has characters per se. There are some, like one of my greatest ones ever is he's now a mate of mine, which is even better. His character was Mitcho the tradie, right? So he would come out in fluoros and an esky. When he won the championship, the belt lived in the esky. It was awesome. But like when he left, it wasn't him. Same as another incredible Victorian wrestler is Edward Dusk. Like I know him personally. He's here in Geelong. He lives here in Geelong as well. And like when you see Dusk and when you see, I won't drop his shoot name just in case.
Edward.
When you see Edward or Dusk, like they are the polar opposite, and it's awesome. But they have put so much work into defining their character that it's believable, even when it's supernatural and weird. You're like, this rocks, right? And like, you know, we see that here in the show, right? Like, you know, look at Bobby Pinn trying to find his character and it's not quite there. And it's like, just be you. And then you got the dad, which I'm glad he kind of got forgotten a little bit.
I liked that character. I thought that was a funny.
Yeah,
like,
it was funny.
Those funny, silly characters in wrestling. Otherwise, it's not wrestling.
Oh, I love comedy wrestling. I adore comedy wrestling. But yeah, so I think you're on a good point there. Is like, you know, especially in that lower promotion standpoint, it's kind of interesting to have the Condemned. And even then at the start of the season, when he brought that character and everyone's like, this is dumb. Like, how did no one realize that he rigged a zip line? I did like that self-referential stuff. Like, you didn't have enough time to tell me, but you had enough time to rip up a zip line. Brilliant. Yep. But then as the season progressed, like people started really like committing to the bit and being like, oh,
Yeah, this
which is nice.
random supernatural guy is just coming out of the blue and fighting us all and destroying everyone here, and we don't know who he is or how he's doing it. And really, it's just Ace with a bit of black eye paint.
Yeah, and I think everyone, it's one of those moments where like everyone went, oh, it's Ace. But I also do love, by the way, small reference, he looks exactly like a Stephen Amell's character of Oliver Queen in The Arrow.
Mhm.
Like even down to just the fucking paint across, like not like a domino mask, just smeared paint across his eye holes. And like part of me wants to go like, are they just ribbing Stephen Amell as well?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it's like the Clark Kent versus Superman. Like, how does nobody know it's him? But that's wrestling. You just separate those things. And yeah, we mentioned some of the side characters getting a lot more focus as well. Namely, sort of Willie. She got a lot more.
Willie got a lot.
Like she was getting a bit towards the end of season 1 with the whole dynamic between her and Wild Bill. But this season, she definitely got a lot more play in terms of what shady business is she doing within the business.
It's very, you realize very quickly that she has that matriarch role, right? In that she's the one that is holding all this together in the background. And like no one really knows. And like even when they show, what's the other woman's name that works at the Dome?
Oh, yep.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you see she's kind of in like, not in the shadows, like she's there, but just to kind of like to do that part while Willie does all the stuff in the back. And then you see sort of her family dynamics as well, and how, you know, she's essentially like, well, kind of barely a functioning alcoholic. And it's just like, you know, she has the thing of like, what we're seeing is obviously, as someone that's also worked in mental health, and I care about those things, and especially when it comes to discussions of trauma, like we're learning very quickly that like each of these characters do have this moment of trauma that sets them on this particular path, and we all have that in the real world. So it's interesting to sort of see how each character handles that moment. And I think that's what we sort of see here, whether it be Ace with his father, you see Jack with his father, but also with his marriage, and you know, Willie, we see sort of what would have been, you know, there was a divide, I think, when like early on where she should have gone and done more but didn't. And then Wild Bill's in the same moment where, you know, when Willie left him to be King Spades, whose name escapes me, Tom.
Yeah, I think so,
Tom's valet instead, and how that like cut him deep, and how everything he's ever done since is simply so he doesn't have to feel that again. Like, oh, character growth everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, I thought I think that's what made this season so much more enjoyable for me, because you weren't sort of cutting off to go, oh, let's go focus on this story for a little bit. And it was a story that you didn't really care about because the character wasn't given much sort of prominence. Whereas now, like,
but without those things, without those little seeds in season 1, we wouldn't care about him now.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So it's like, well, why do we give a shit about Bobby Pin? And it's like season 2, you're like, oh, this is why I should care about Bobby Pin. And like, it's all because of that key moment back then, you know, comes over here.
And yeah, Stacey, she had a lot more to do with it. And again, I would have liked to see that whole dynamic where she kind of assumes the Willie role moving forward, but that's kind of disappeared. And the Crystal character, and like the whole way her story kind of brings in the whole women's wrestling revolution and movement as well. I thought that was very well done.
Oh yeah, and they even tackled the conversation around intergender wrestling. So I personally love intergender and/or no gender wrestling. You know, however you want it, whatever vernacular you wish to use. I think it's incredible because wrestling's fucking predetermined. Spoilers, everyone. So like everyone in the ring is agreeing. You know, it's fun. You can tell twice as many stories. You know, and it's rad. And like they addressed it in the show to be like, well, hey, here's real footage, I think it was, of like a football player decking some girl. And they're like, well, we can't run that anymore. We should make women's division. And I wish they kind of kept it more intergender throughout the season, but like I can see why, like they hinted at it and go, look, this is why it's a contentious issue. So we're going to do this.
Yeah, I don't know. I hate the whole division, especially like being in and around PWA who have been doing the intergender thing for a long time, and they slowly phased it out, and now it's wrestling. Like if you're on the roster, you're on the roster. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what gender, whatever. Like
Yeah, because same goes for Deathmatch Down Under, which is the promotion that I work for primarily, and MXW. Both of them have, so right now, Charlie Rose is the title holder for MXW, and she's just wrestled dudes the whole time, which is awesome. DMDU, it's Gore as the champion at the moment, but Delta, who if you're in Australian wrestling, you never know who Delta is because she's brilliant. And
Delta.
there you go. Boom, Delta. She's lovely too, by the way. We see it all the time, and these no gender matches are they're incredible, and I find them way more fun and way more compelling. And if you look at the likes of WWE or AEW, you watch when a lot of these wrestlers were on the indies, they did rip a intergender. There's that awesome Cedric Alexander Candice LeRae match from way back. It's like Chris Statlander and doing a bunch of awesome stuff. It does feel really kind of and old.
Oh yeah.
But
yes,
because even in the show, in the season finale, they had a women's title match. It was El Dorado, which was AJ Lee versus Crystal, and the belt was nowhere to be seen.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
Yep, and I don't really like they did it's a woman's belt, so let's make it white. Lame.
Yeah, always the way.
That's a greater wrestling nitpick that I have, not just the show. So that's really me bringing in my own biases in.
Yeah, that's a very WWE thing that's kind of filtered down. The women's belts have white straps for some reason. I guess at least they didn't go with pink.
That is true. There was no butterflies to be seen.
Oh god, that Divas title. That was bad. What a bad design. That was
Look, if it didn't, I liked the concept, but if it didn't look like a tramp stamp, it'd be okay. You can have an effeminate title, but don't make it look like a really bad tattoo from 2002.
Yep. The Crystal storyline was great. I thought she was fantastic. I loved seeing her growth even from season 1. The parking lot fight, and she hits the head scissors
that
runner. I was like, whoa, what a moment! And it was cool to sort of see her play that back in that match with Serenity and El Dorado, hitting those moves still as well.
But I really liked how they tackled that as well, in terms of they're she's like, I'm top shit here, and I'm so excited. And then the next episode, essentially of season 2, she comes in and she realizes that she's not the top woman, because hey, here's AJ Lee looking the fittest I think she's ever been in her entire life. I don't think she's more muscle than human. She's looking great, and then she's doing all this flippy doodah shit, and it's incredible, and then she talks about the challenge of being an indie wrestler as it's well, I'm never really going to get a title, I'm just going to go from town to town, and she's kind of reflecting on, I think that's what sort of pays off at the back end of the season as well, with Crystal being no, I'm going to stay here. These are the guys that gave me my shot. I'm gonna support them, and I'm in the same boat. Even I have nothing but love and admiration for the promotions that gave me my shot, and I would never step away from them.
And she brings up the whole idea of, to be a woman in wrestling, it's not there's multiple spots on every show. There might be 2 spots on a show, and one of them's going to be the local guys. Woman.
Yeah, and even in the big promotions in the real world, I don't know why.
Yeah, there might be one or 2 women's matches. And it's that kind of sucks.
So AEW pay-per-view recent, was it All In had 1?
Yeah, it had the women's match. And
it had the title match, that was it.
Oh, I think
the biggest stadium in the biggest show in the world.
Athena was on the pre-show, maybe?
No.
That might have been All Out.
That was All Out, yes. Yeah. That was All Out.
So
tangent. Heels.
Yeah.
Sorry, you can't have tell I'm ADHD's all hell, and it's the end of the day.
To be fair,
meds are gone.
Maybe undiagnosed.
Yeah, man.
Just
Welcome
a
to the
little
party. Yeah, welcome to the party, pal. It's pretty cool.
yeah, CM Punk, AJ Lee, great to see those two sort of in wrestling again together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a nice moment until I realized that CM Punk's an asshole and always has been.
Yeah. So, and Wild Bill Hancock, he had a great sort of storyline in this one with a surprising role as an angel or god.
Yeah, that was
like,
rad.
what?
As he's like, he's doing these like C-list movies, and that's how he's sort of funding
Yeah.
his shit.
Yeah, these crazy like
That was
Christian, random Christian movies and making bank apparently. So that was fun.
But even, like I said, with him, like he became this mentor character, which I really love. And then it kind of, it's one of those things where when you see that and you see who the real Wild Bill is, you start to go, oh, this is why you did all these things. Pardon me, like you realize that every time he's trying to get up of someone, it's trying to pull something out of them, right? Like not a response for him. Part of it was a response for him, but it's kind of like, do it. Give me what that's in there. Give me that fire. Give me that passion, right? So even in, I think it was the second last episode, where, Jim was kind of like having this struggles at home and how he couldn't talk about it. And then he comes in, they're doing a promo class and he says something and Bill's like, poke, 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 and builds this incredible promo. And that's when like wrestling is its best, when it blurs the the kayfabe and the real and the outside world and smushes it together until we don't know where it is. That's why the series is so good. But like, yeah, and then like Diego gets in as well, and then at the end they goes, and that's how you promo. I'm like, fuck! I thought they got super real heated for a minute there.
Yeah, it was. I think that's like the cool thing. Like that's what you want your veteran talents to be doing. Like to be giving those lessons without like getting into sort of the preachy mode of like, oh,
yeah, or without just like teaching and like giving them lectures.
Let the person learn it themselves by just dealing with you, not. This is what you got to do, because people don't always take that on in that way. They kind of like sometimes you teach people that way and they do it because, well, this is what you said to do. Like they don't understand this is why I have to do it this way.
Yeah, and like in a world that's as dynamic as wrestling, like you can't just be told how to do it. Otherwise, everyone would still like the luchador scene wouldn't be as big. Like we would. There's all these things that just wouldn't happen because someone would we would all still be wrestling like Hogan in the 80s, right? Things have changed. And because as someone myself, and it sounds like you might be the same, Jamie, is that like the shepherding, right? I don't like, if someone like, I much rather be given my fence and go, you can do whatever you want in here, but these are the restrictions that you have, and we'll shepherd you around. Like, no, don't look over there, look over here. Think about it. You're getting stuck over here. And that's what we saw in how Bill was teaching here, which I think is actually the best way to teach, is he's sort of going like, no, over here. Like I'm pushing you, I'm nudging you. Like, yeah, because even in that promo, he's like, you've lost me, bring it back. He's like, there's one of those little moments where he's like, is he fighting him? And he goes, hold it, bring it over here. He's like, oh no, he's working. This is great.
And I think they do that with the Crystal character as well. They kind of get her to realize, oh wait, we need to go this direction with your character, and get her to come back to DWL from FWD. I wish they'd separated those names a bit better.
Well, actually, that's a good point, because I think we've kind of hit all the DWL characters. What do you think of Gully in season 2?
I thought he was super fun. He comes off as like a crazed maniac, like very sort of ECW Paul Heyman.
Yes. Yeah, and like for me, what I got neurodiverse. That's the character that I got. I'm like, this dude's ADHD is all fucked, right? Because he's committed, he's passionate, and like doesn't, it's one of those things where like he has this, and they really fleshed it out here, because in the season 1 he was just a prick, right? But in season 2 you go, no, this dude is a businessman, and like, yes, what he does is unideal in sort of how he pushes people and the way he works, but he's good at what he does and he fucking cares. You know, so you see him sort of evolve but still be him, even down to the season finale with him being like, this is how it's got to go, this is what we've got to do, because you know we have to have a working relationship, but it's going to benefit us both, but you're too blind to see. Like he's very emotive, he runs on emotion, but he's not. Like he's also very logical and undertone of it all, where where Jack is purely emotion all the time.
Yeah, the Gully character is definitely business-minded. He's fantastic in sort of the promotional aspect as well. We see him like randomly, like after something happens, he's like, right, get the camera out, we're cutting a promo and chucking it on YouTube and Twitter straight away. Like quickly, nails it first take.
The whole idea of Gully is God popped me really hard. I don't know why. That felt very Paul Heyman, very Eric Bischoff. You know, it had that real like not quite Tony Khan. He doesn't quite have that love. Maybe when like first year of AEW, I guess, but like they had this idea that like he is the dude, and like whatever he says is fucking gold. And even down to like everyone goes there and they're impressed by him and all these things, and like the FWD, whatever the hell building they called it, you know, was kind of cool. Like it was like awesome sort of venue, like this big bar mixed. I would love
that.
To
looks like a sick venue. That was great, and yeah, that sort of had TNA, old school TNA vibes too, like with the elevated ramp and stuff. Like that's such a fun venue. Seeing him guiding Rooster in his promo, that was very much more of the Vince McMahon style promo, where it's like, speed it up, do this, like, you need to talk louder or quieter or something, and Rooster's like, kind of.
We also see that in Jack as well, with him, like you say, is exactly how it's written, which is very Vince. So seeing that as well, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's another one of those weird, like, this isn't quite indie wrestling, but it's not quite top level wrestling, because indie wrestling, they're very much kind of just like, okay, you've got this much time, you're against this guy. Here are the dot points. Do this, do that, don't do this. We trust you. Have fun. Like the amount of run sheets I've seen whenever it's comms and like 6 matches and like 4 of them are we trust you. Have fun. Yeah, this guy's winning. You know, these are the couple of things you have to hit.
They're over. This is the final spot. This is the story. We'll cut these promos after.
What's your finish? Okay, that's that. Okay, they're doing that finish. You can't do that one. You got to do something else.
You can't do a low blow because they're doing one. All right, who's going outside? Are you going outside? Well, I'm sorry, you can't go outside because they're main. Like that's pretty much how it is, and it's fun. Watching it, like, I don't know whether you've seen a complete site with tangenting again. Like I don't know whether you've ever been at like an indie show like during that day, and like watching them all like plan it all is incredible. Like I took my son to a show recently, and he's 6, and he's starting to get into wrestling as well, which is awesome. It's the best feeling. So he was sitting there and just watching. Like for some reason he clicked with Kid Valiant and Broderick Valentine. Because they were planning their spots and they're all quite flippy and high fly stuff, and he's just like locked in. And because my kid's a little late HD kid too, right? So he's just like, phew, and like he complete hyper focus went onto them, and he's watching him. He could see it, and he's feeling it, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like it's an experience. Like seeing it outside of the match is a whole different experience, and like, yeah, it's so good. And then like I think the show captured that energy as well. Like we never really see them rehearse the matches as much. We see them talking through it, but it's in much more of a grander way, not just 2 dudes sitting in a fucking hallway of a community center being like, well, I'm going to do this and that, and you know.
Yeah, being at shows early for the wrestling cards recently, watching them playing out matches, it's like this is very much a dance compared to like
it is.
You watch it in the ring, like in the actual match, they're hitting each other, and that takes away that dance aspect. But then when you're watching the pre-show, like running through spots, it's like, oh yeah, they're dancing, and it's very strange to see that dichotomy.
Yeah, and you see that trust in each other, which is crazy, and which is interesting because we see in the season finale, back to Gully, like when the entire final sort of spot of their versus card is, you know, that Jack turns and he's like, fuck it, fuck DWL, FWD's where it's at. And like it worked within their wrestling, within the characters, it worked within the show. It was awesome. And it's like, oh man, this is
Oh
gnarly.
yeah, he
Like,
got real heat when he turned on the
yeah,
local town.
I gave him real heat because I didn't see it coming. I was like, you fuck, that's a good story beat. You suck. Yeah.
And the one thing I hated about that whole final match was in the lead up, he's practicing like trying to become a high flyer again, and his ghost dad is being like, "That's not you. Don't do it. Don't do it." And then when it got to the match, and he's like, they're climbing up onto the like stadium part, and they're about to dive off. I'm like, "Oh, this is going to end so badly." And then when it didn't, I was kind of like, "Okay, cool. It didn't end badly." And then it ended badly.
This is the thing. So I was watching that because we've hit all the characters. Let's talk story bits, right? Let's talk season finale. So I'm watching the show and everything's getting like nicely bowed, right? Everything's lovely. Aside from like, how are we paying for all this? The people from the whatever streaming service are loving it. They're having a great time. And all this, that, the other. It's like win, 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 win. I'm like, well, where's the losses? Like, we've seen this show. This show is drama. Like, where's the drama? And then we see little hints of it, and we see like, while Bill clenches his arm, I'm like, oh no, he's gonna have a heart attack. That's gonna be the killer. No, swerve, the best swerve. Because I was like, and then we see the moonsault stuff. No,
Shooting
star press. Yeah, and we see that, and like he lands it. I'm like, because for me, what I saw that as is early in the past 2 seasons, what we've seen is we've seen Jack be dictated by his father. Even in his passing, he's dictated by his dad. And in this moment, this is him going, no, I'm going to be my own man and I'm going to try this. I'm going to show you that I can do something just because even if you said I could, or in my mind or whatever. And he lands it. I'm like, yes, eat a dick, Tom, you piece of shit. And then he's like, my back hurts. I can't feel my legs. I'm like, oh, no.
Shit.
And then I went, oh, no. Oh, my God. Gully's going to think he fucking pulled out. Because, like, that's the most, like, that's Ace's entire Jack's entire MO this whole series. And he's like, shit. But, like, and then it's one of those moments where Gully can be mad because, yes, it wasn't the finish they agreed to, but he got hurt. But he only got hurt because he went off script and did a move
that he didn't need to do.
Yeah. So it's like that moment of he should be mad, but he shouldn't, but he should. So like they're still rooted. And then on the back of that, you're like, oh man, even, because the woman from the network is like having a grand old time on the ringside. And they're like, well, we're going to buy both these companies. These companies rule.
And force them to work together.
Yeah, and like, we've got so much debt that we're rooted whatever happens. And I was like, oh, shit. All right, fascinating. All right.
Yeah.
Great season finale. I'm like, bullshit, we're going to get any more. What's your thoughts?
I thought the same. It ended on this incredible cliffhanger. It was exciting and sad. It was all the emotions wrapped up into one. And then today's news ruined all of my excitement and fun for season 3.
Yeah, literally. I sent the tweet to my partner and I just got a message going, get fucked. And then so she joined me at the gym tonight and she's like, I'm still mad. I'm fuming. Because I spent all of like the beginning of the week because we watched the series finale this weekend. And she's like, I've been talking to all my friends at work because they're like, "What'd you get up?" She's like, "Oh, I watched the show." And then they got into the show as well. I know, it's the worst part. And she's all like staring and so excited about how the show ended on this awesome cliffhanger. And she's like, "I can't wait for the." It was for me, it was hard enough. We had to wait from like 2021 to 2023. I'm like, that's such an insane amount of time. And then she's like, "Oh, this is bullshit. I need to know what the next. Like, how can they end it like that?" I'm like, "How are they going to end it like that forever?"
Yeah, I hope
another network picks it up. Like unlike Glow, which also ended abruptly, I think there's a potential here to go elsewhere because Stars is kind of a fledgling, network. It's not like a Netflix.
Who are going to charge you a fortune to take the rights to their show. Like I think Stars might let go at a relatively decent cost.
In the same way that like Community shifted over to, Yahoo or from NBC or whatever, like it's possible that someone might pick it up. Like, shit, it wouldn't even surprise me if, like, you know, someone over at Turner, like, jumps on it and goes, well, we've got AEW, like, we can grab this and we can do some work, because, you know, maybe not CM Punk, but, like, you know what I mean, like, maybe Peacock will pick it up as well, like, who knows? Like, there's clearly an interest for it. We don't know what the ratings are, obviously, or how successful the show has been, but it's and I'm also very aware that within my echo chamber, which is wrestling, like, I'm like, everyone loves this show. Like, no. In my space, everyone loves this show.
Yeah, even looking at a lot of the reviews from sort of the general TV review crowd, it seems to be pretty well received. I'm not sure how big an audience it got because of the platform it was on. So, yeah, like a Turner would be a great idea, because AEW is one of their highest rated programs every week. So this would be sort of that perfect intro type show where, hey, it's not 100% wrestling. It's kind of a drama series that'll bring in that sort of maybe female audience a bit more, and then introduce them to
in the same way that they started doing Road to the Top, right? To try to get that divas sort of audience, right? Or Bellas.
Yeah.
Both those series. So there might be an appetite over there. Like, it'd be potentially awesome for those that are willing to step outside of the wrestling and into that acting space. Certainly a good stepping stone, perhaps.
Yep.
Like, that's fantasy. We just fantasy booked a whole show, like the booking of a show. But
and like,
but you know,
I'm sure Stephen Amell has enough money to potentially like buy this out and make it a show for himself. Like, he's a major star in the show, so it kind of sucks for him that it's gone. So I could see him like,
well, you sure
helping
hope
to
so.
fund it and like help this find a new home.
Like, I'm not quite sure what that CW money was like towards the end, because like Arrow kind of lost a lot of love in the end. But like, I mean, if he was smart when Arrow was popping, like, hopefully he kept some cash. But you know, maybe obviously this is the thing as well, because obviously he himself has worked with WWE, he himself's worked with AEW. Like, I'm sure he could pitch it somewhere if he was to get on that, but the likelihood of that is hard.
Yeah, even like YouTube TV in the US, like I'm sure they're always on the search for more content and things like that. Hulu, there's plenty of places that could go land. It's just a matter of whether it does. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, once again, like that Warner Discovery, like with Max or whatever, like they're going to need more services, even though they're just canceling everything at the moment. So maybe not. You know.
Yeah, fingers crossed it finds a new
knows?
home, because that ending, for it to end on that's in Mindhunter territory, where it just ended on this horrible ending where you're like, I wanted the next season more than I wanted this current season. So we'll see.
It's hard. It's painful in like all, especially because then you also sort of see like you have like the sad ending of Jack, right? But then you also like the positive of like, well, what happens when they get funded with all this money? Like, what does that mean from a production standpoint within the show? Like, what does this mean for Ace? Because like you said, see the adulation of Ace, and they're like that.
He finally got his moment.
He got that moment.
Gone.
Yeah.
And
it's almost like season 1 where they took it away from him.
And he got his moment, and he's been traumatized again because now his brother is potentially paralyzed. So it's like, this poor guy, every time something good happens to him, he just starts to get into wrestling. His dad dies. He just gets to the title, like, the top of the promotion. His brother gets paralyzed. Like, geez, poor dude.
One of my favorite TV shows of all time is Prison Break, right? I love that show to no end. I don't know why. It's shitty, but I love it. But every episode ends in problems, more problems. And like, this show had that similar energy where every episode ends on like shit, more problems. And then now it's in the end, it's like, this is a pretty big problem.
Yeah.
Don't leave me hanging.
But, oh well, we'll see. And then I did some extra research when we were preparing for this. Found a couple of fun trivia bits. Did you know Stephen Amell broke his back in October 2020, performing a stunt for the very first episode of this show?
No, which would explain why it took so long.
So yeah, he broke his back. I was like, oh my god. So
brutal. Actually,
full
no,
circle for this whole show. He broke his back for the first episode. And
they've blurred the lines of. Oh,
nice mind blowing moment.
This show can't end.
I know, terrible. And then Kelly Berglund, who plays Crystal, she
Yes.
put on 15 pounds of muscle for this role. I'm like, she's still tiny. Like she must have been. She must have been real
like
small.
an infant.
So.
Yeah.
That's Heels season 2. Hopefully, there's more to come. Rated.
Yeah, don't listen.
Reviewed. What would you give this in terms of a rating out of 5?
Oh, my heart of hearts wants to go a 5 because of all the emotion. Actually, no, fuck it. It's 5. Like, mostly because of not just the quality of the show, but also for me, that is backed by pure emotion, right? In terms of, I talked about the start of this recording of like why I love it so much. And like for that reason alone is what sways it. Everyone knows that reviews are inherently subjective. And my review of this show is super subjective because I love it so dearly because of I said it's respect to the business. It introduced my partner to wrestling in a different way, so she gets it more and she cares for it more now. It created a nice bonding thing for us. I was able to overcome some trauma through this show. Yeah, I love it.
Very nice. I gave this a 4 out of 5. Just yet.
Well, yeah, it's probably more of a reasonable. If I wasn't being
there were
such
a few things that like just kind of grossed me out a bit. And there's a few.
What were some of those little nitpicks? We've sung pretty positively for this whole recording. So what are some of the things that you had?
Just some of like you mentioned, sort of the soap opera-y acting moments. There's a lot of moments where Stephen Amell in particular is trying to do something emotional, and I saw a tweet about it, and ever since I saw that, I can't unsee it now. When he's like trying to do emotional things,
he looks
like up to the right, and now every time I watch him, I'm like, oh, he's trying to do the emotional thing, and that pulls me out of it all the time.
There's a bunch of actors that once you realize they're I forget who it was, but someone does like whenever they're trying to like be emotive, they do these eye darts. So, and you go, oh, okay, you're trying to make me feel sad because, yes. And I think some of Stephen Amell's acting is like fine. And like, it's not awesome, but he does the job done. So yeah, there are some moments. I think from the soap opera standpoint that you mentioned, like there are moments where they're very clearly just monologuing. Like with season 1 felt very conversational a lot of the time. Where here, in that soap opera nature, there were quite a lot of moments where no one speaks like that. Not quite like in a Gilmore Girls way where everyone's like wit like crazy. Like, when Ace talks to his mum and has that sort of revelation, she's like, oh, and then like, even there's moments when Willie and her partner were talking, like the way they were lit was like one was really well lit, one was really poorly lit, but it was delivered in such a way of like, well, I'm going to talk and now you talk, rather than conversational. It was like, here's my monologue, your monologue. And then it felt more heavily written. Not that it was not badly written, it's just
more obviously written.
Heavier.
Like less sort of ad-libbing and making it feel natural.
Less organic.
And then there was a couple of moments where they were using clearly CGI, in particular in the final episode with the crowd shots outside the Duffy Dome. It's like, how many people are here?
That's a lot of bodies.
That's a WrestleMania crowd. That was a huge crowd.
That is a world record. Like that's 84,000. Like that's a lot of bodies out there.
There's stuff like that kind of just pulled me out of moments where I should have been like fully invested in the story.
Do you think that's because, once again, we're talking about before about how we watched season 1 and went, this isn't reflective of real wrestling because there's no way that a promotion of this size could run. And then we see this and like, that's an unreal crowd for a promotion of this size. Do you think your awareness of wrestling is what hit that rather than the CG?
Yeah, probably. The packed out Duffy Dome, that was fine. It was the 100,000 people outside the arena. I was like, what the hell?
Because I even had the same moment when Stephen Amell did the shooting star, and because when you see someone do it, they don't pivot from the hips, right? It's kind of in your torso. But because he was cabled up in order to do it like a stunt, you see him pivot from the hips. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's just me. But like, I know that's me. To anyone else, that'd be fine. But like, I just saw where it was. Yeah. Because that center of gravity as you pull up is all from your torso.
So there's a few moments that kind of pulled me out of it, which kind of dragged the overall score down. But still, at a 4, I think it's a great watch. Like, great introduction to wrestling as well. So if you have someone,
I would wonder if there's a conversion.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the conversion is. But yeah, I think if you have someone that is kind of tangentially interested in like maybe getting into wrestling, that would be the way to sort of introduce them. And like, here's the story aspects of it, here's the characters, and it's less about the actual wrestling. And then once you get them hooked on that, then you can get them into the actual wrestling.
And I think that's a really good point, right? Because like because I similar to yourself, like we wear our wrestling love on our sleeves. You wear it on your shirt. Like I'm wearing a PlayStation shirt today, but normally there's some sort of wrestling attire, right? So like for that reason, I talk wrestling all the time because it's my biggest passion outside of PlayStation and my son. You know, so like people go like, well, what is it you love about it? And it's one of those moments where you try to explain it and it's really hard because you're like, well, there is nothing else like it. You know, it's movies and TV, but it's not, because it's a live show every week. It's a traveling show. It's theater, but it's not. It's stunts. It's an action in all these action stunts, but it's not. Like, it's all these different little things at once that there is nothing else in this world that can replicate all the little things that seamlessly come together into wrestling. And it's one of those moments where they tell stories, even though every story ends in, I'm going to punch you, like, which is inherently not how the world works because that's bad. But like, you can still tell incredible emotion fueled stories about overcoming adversity, friendship. You know, like I swear by the story of Hangman Adam Page and his run at AEW, and like his run to becoming champion. Like, that is one of the most impressive stories to me personally. It's the most relatable stories to me as someone that's also full of self-doubt and anxiety and all those things that he hit. Like, I bawled my eyes out when he won. Right? Because it just, you know, and like, so explain it to someone, they don't get it. So, but like, hopefully this show can hit that middle ground and show people like, you know, yeah, it's predetermined or fake or however you want to work it. But for the people in it, it's real. Like, we're channeling real characters and real emotion and real drive and story and passion and all these little details, and that's why we care about it so much. So even if there's like fucking 2 people that watch this and go, oh, I get it, like, that's the best case scenario, at least for me.
Yeah, like, even, have you watched the Wrestlers show on Netflix yet?
No, it's like, I heard it's like a very interesting show.
It's cool, but there's a moment where Al Snow talks about the titles, and like, yes, in wrestling, a title is kind of just a prop, essentially. But also, when a wrestler has to lose a title, it hurts. Like, it's kind of like, oh,
yeah,
I'm not the guy anymore. And even though it's a prop, it still like sucks to lose a championship.
It's that validation for all the hard work that you've done. It is essentially a little medal on your shirt.
Yeah, it's the gold star.
But like, especially for those that
gold star for the month.
Yeah, for those that have. You're our favorite. But for those that have worked in the space, like, you know, it could be a decade's worth of work. You know, it's interesting. Like, you know, once again, working in a deathmatch company, one of Australia's deathmatch legends, Mad Dog, has never won a deathmatch title ever.
That's crazy.
And he's one of the pioneers of it in this country, and it astounds me. But I've never asked him. But I think it's one of those things where, like, for him, it doesn't matter. Like, for what I do outlives that. But for some, it's like, well, obviously titles mean a lot. You've got 3 of them behind you.
Yeah, there's 4. There's one down the bottom.
Which one's down the bottom?
Down the bottom. Down the bottom.
You know, and it's one of those things where, like, they are props, but they mean something powerful.
Yeah, so
it's like for those that like sports, it's like, hey, you got the grand final cup thing.
Yeah, like, 10 years down the line, like, I still got that as something to show, like, hey, look what I did back here.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I never understood sports until I got into wrestling, and then I went, "Oh, I get it now." Because I used to grow up. I was never a sports guy. I grew up thinking sports are dumb. Why do you know all the players and their numbers and their bullshit? And someone's like, "Can you tell me about this?" Oh yeah, give me a second. All right, let's go. I'm like, "Oh, I just did that." Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I get it. And like that sense of community.
Like, who won the WWE title in this year? And you're like, "Oh yeah, this guy did this, and he beat this guy, and this
that's
happened."
person.
It's like, "Oh, okay, I'm that guy."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a great chat about Heels season 2. We'll see.
Yeah, I didn't shut, like, was this an hour and 15? I didn't shut up for about an hour and 5 of that. So I'm really glad I let you talk for about 10 minutes, Jamie. But
we'll see if we get season 3. But thank you, everyone, for listening to the commentary booth. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on podcast services and on YouTube. You can follow Ryan on Instagram at the Pop Culturists. Anything special coming up for you guys?
Yeah, if you want to follow me over on Twitter, it's at HaggardMC, HAGGARDMC. In terms of the pop culturist, the Pop C, each week we have a PlayStation themed podcast called For the Players. We've got PAX coming up, so there'll be good stuff coming out of there. Spider-Man's a big game. But if you want to talk wrestling, though, if you are based around the Victorian state, you can find me at Deathmatch Down Under. I do commentary there. You'll find me at MXW. You'll find me at Adrenaline Pro Wrestling over in Seafa. I do commentary there as well. And I work ring crew / whatever Mikey wants me to do over at Renegades of Wrestling. So you can see me at a bunch of promotions. I've meant through 1, 2, 3 of the 4 on IWTV. So you can see me, you can hear me chat over there if you're into that sort of stuff. And what's Renegades is on Fight. Renegades is awesome. All those promotions are awesome. But yes, if you happen to be a viewer of this show and Jamie's work or Jamie's cards, which all of mine are here.
Oh, very nice.
Because I'm trying to find, I'm trying to find a cool way to display them all. So I'm like, all right, what do you do? And I'm also shamelessly going to get my friends to sign them all.
Yeah, the display part is the hard part. I've just got them in the folder.
Yeah. No, because I want them on my wall. Because I want people to come into my house and go, "You're a fucking nerd. You're a dork." I'm like, "Yes, I am. Check this out." That's what I sort of want. But yes, if you're around the Victorian wrestling scene, if you see me, come say hey. Super down to chat.
Perfect. All right, and you can follow me on social media at JammyUps Media and at Pario Magazine. Thanks, Ryan, for jumping on the show, and we will hopefully in a year or 2 come back and chat season 3. Fingers crossed.
If not, I'll heel turn. I'll get real.
I'm sure we'll find some other random wrestling crossover to chat about at some point.
Find something.
The Commentary Booth is a fan-funded production of Jamie Ups Media. You can support the podcast alongside our magazine, Pario Magazine, on Patreon at patreon.com/Jamie Ups Media. The following people supported at the publisher level or higher, and you cannot fathom how incredibly appreciative we are for their support.